All right, we're officially recording here. Eventually it's going to go onto Facebook, so we'll be all good. In the time of COVID-19, we're having to adapt like everybody else. And so campaigning in COVID-19 means doing interviews and town halls online. And so all last week, we were able to interview people who are running for the U.S. Senate on the Democratic side. We had one technical issue, and we still have the technical issue. We're here with retired Vice Admiral Franken. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, JD. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just down the road from you. I'm in downtown Sioux City, and you're up in exalted Morningside land. But it's great to be in District 4 of my home state.
Yeah. This is the first time I've had somebody in the district doing this in the district. So this is not only in the district, in Sioux City. So it's a little weird. Usually it's all Des Moines stuff. So, well, happy to have you on. For folks who may not know you,
I think you highlighted an issue. You know, you're not going to do really, really well in this state unless you concentrate on the counties outside of Polk. There are 98 others.
There you go. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit, not only about who you are, but kind of how you got to decide to run for
Sure, happy to. Okay, so I was born and raised straight north of here, in between Haywarden and Sioux Center. There's a small burg called Lebanon. It's 54 people at the time. 11 of them were my family. 9 were next door. So it's a parsonage, it's a church, it's a little store, it's a feed service, it's a trucking company, it's 2 farms, and that's Lebanon. And wouldn't have it any other way. Dad came back from World War II as a wounded vet, built a machine shop to fix farm implements a long ways from all towns. My mom was a one-room schoolhouse teacher. I'm the youngest of 9. Did what many of my siblings did, and uncles and aunts and the like, and joined the military when I was in college. Didn't know I was going to stay for so long, but did for almost 40 years, from 78 to 2017. Rose to 3-star Admiral, was a ship captain, battle group captain, commanded the land forces in Africa, East Africa, a lot of time in policy and strategy jobs. I'm an engineer, physics degrees, and pleased to be having this opportunity to come back. I came back to run on this in the Senate race, principally to ensure that we had a candidate that negated the things that got Joni elected in the first place. A, she's from rural. B, she did military service. And lastly, the whole pig thing. And having grown up as a farmhand, a welder, construction worker, 3 years in a hog kill plant, from the stick pin to the chitlin table to the head to the luggin to the ren ring, you name it. I've done that. So I negate the things that Joni used, and I'm well established in what it was to be a person from Iowa in every respect. And frankly, after almost 40 years of service to the country, I was a bit dismayed when this president was elected. I thought that we would slide backwards, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I was going to do my part. And the best place to do that is in the U.S. Senate, to ultimately control the Senate and put some controls on this president's lesser tendencies.
Yeah.
My platform is threefold. As I said, science is heavily involved in my desire to boost the efficacy of farming so that it is squared away with the climate hawks, and also to address the income disparities that are force-fed by special interest, and also healthcare, the biggest issue of all. And this pandemic shows that we should have healthcare for everyone in the United States, much like the healthcare I benefited from in 40 years in the military. So happy to answer your questions and delve into any topic you so desire.
Fantastic. I have 4 topics that we sent out: agriculture, childcare, education, healthcare. Those are the backbone, I feel, of the 4th district. And then if folks have we posted on Facebook about this. So if they add in Facebook comments, they're going to chime in. Otherwise, folks who are on Zoom with us right now, if you have a question, put them in the Q&A area down below. We'll get to those as well. So the 4th district, you grew up here, you know, is the second most agriculture producing district in America. And what we're seeing right now with the, we have, like with Smithfield up in Sioux Falls, having an outbreak, we're seeing that there's not a lot of flexibility or adaptability in the food supply system. When my grandpa was farming in the 70s and 80s, well, in 1967, there were over 9,000 and close to 10,000 slaughterhouses in America. A lot of local slaughterhouses. Now we're down to about 1,000. And so with that intense market consolidation, we don't have a lot of flexibility. With that, I just want to open it up to you and ask, like, what would you do in agriculture? What are some of the things that you think we need to do as a nation?
Well, we've got the near term and the long term. To your point about the number of slaughterhouses we used to have, if things don't improve for the cattle feeders, pig feeders in this state, you're going to have slaughterhouses showing up in people's barns because they have to butcher their cattle because they can no longer feed them. I don't know of a single line of effort in agriculture today that's profitable in the state of Iowa. From dairy to chickens, it's all looks pretty dour. And this is a result of no single thing, but a series of issues. I just was speaking to State Senator Dotzler, who is having issues with the Tyson plant and COVID issues, and we're in his district. This is, we've got to be in speaking of the now, we've got to be very careful, because having some experience in pandemic, both simulations and in actual applications, Ebola and the hurricanes issues, to rebuild after mass devastation, we've got to be very careful in a couple of areas. In the today, the food supply is preeminent. Power, water, sewage, civil authority, civil obedience, etc., all need to be maintained. We risk a prolonging the strife associated with this if we surrender the ability for this state to do what's necessary for the nation, for the world, and apply and execute its agriculture mission and its agricultural support mission. So today, we need to make sure that we're planning ahead and doing due diligence to ensure that we can maintain our role in this country. Regarding the more broader agriculture issue, we need to fix our trade policies. And having had the East Asia account twice in my career, I understand quite a bit about the way China does its work along with Southeast Asia and the trade incongruities associated with that. But agriculture is taking it on the chin, inordinately so. We need certainly we need a senator, we need congressmen and women who have a strong farming sense, people who are touched with the soil and are listening to farmers. The last time I got together with the farmers, I got to come around from high school friends, and they were, I would expect, around the table, mostly Republican, if not also. But it doesn't make their positions unnecessarily quiet. I mean, they are my constituents, and they voice their issues. The farm bill is problematic in many respects. It is the discriminator between profit and loss, and that's absolutely wrong. And it's as a result of poor trade policy. There's a series associated with antitrust laws that are in existence that aren't being followed. There are price supports, which I think we've got to be very careful with, but we need some of these to brace up industries that were caught flat-footed because of change of policies. Certainly the RFS exemptions stands as the biggest issue, which involves pulling the carpet out from underneath us, the rug out from underneath us. As a district, certainly in my home county of Sioux County, O'Brien, Dickinson, et cetera, the big corn growers that have devastated the market. And this doesn't change quickly overnight. And the inefficiencies that the poor procedures that this administration in particular introduced to us are going to be rather long in fixing, because other nations have stepped in the place of where the United States was in international markets.
Yeah.
I mean, the list of things to do, I have 8 on my list, but it's significant.
Yeah, I'm one of the things that's I've been saying before, and for the last couple of years, running last cycle and this fall, and now, but even before COVID-19, is talking about the need for regional food hubs and making sure that we're a secure nation because we're a food secure nation. And that is, I feel coming out of this, we have a huge opportunity to take advantage of that and to help farmers to stay on their land and make a buck. And so, there's a lot that needs to be done.
Shorten the lines of distribution from producers to from agricultural producers to the manufacturers to the markets. Right now, it's nationwide. It's hugely inefficient, and it's all sorts of interruptions that could possibly throw it out of kilter.
Yeah, I saw this stat: 60% of apple juice is imported from China. When we have Harrison County just south of here, and I know there's a orchard in Jefferson, in places like this, and it doesn't make much sense. Moving on, because I know we got a lot of questions to get to. The annual cost of care this is childcare. The annual cost of care is estimated to be more than $10,000 a year for childcare. How would you expand childcare?
Well, yeah, I especially in rural area, District 4, where the federal standard is around $7,000 that we're expected to spend. A family's expected to spend on childcare. In urban Iowa, I think it's around $9,000. I think it's $11,000 in rural areas. So in an area where the salary structure is lower, we're paying more. This strikes real close to home because I have a niece who's struggling with the same issue in eastern Iowa. She's reliant on family as her primary fallback, as her primary child care provider, which is rather feeble in terms of a statewide program. You need to have an expanded Head Start. You need to have block grants, USDA block grant increases. You need to lower a pre-K school opportunities, maybe even a wraparound in our grade schools where where the younger kids also have nurseries. I mean, that's controversial, that's expensive, but some areas need that, and we shouldn't restrict. And it's usually the woman who is the provider of the children at home. We should restrict their professional opportunities because there are no child care options, and it's absolutely mandatory that we fix this issue, because so much potential workforce and inventive thought resident in those who are watching children could be in the workspace. But here's the other thing. The average wage of $11.35 an hour for a child care provider is far too low. It should be on par with what our school teachers, what our education providers in grade school get, which is not enough as it is.
Right on. Again, we have a bunch of questions, so I want to get through mine quickly. In 1953, and this is about education, it's a good transition into education. In 1953, there were 4,500 local school districts here in Iowa. Now there's only 333. What are your plans for education here federally for the state of Iowa?
Well, so I'm a beneficiary of when Sioux Center High School was in the 99th percentile in the state, and the state was in the 99th percentile in the nation. And if you were a decent student, you were in a good stead when you went off to college. And people from Iowa walked into the workforce worldwide, eminently qualified to do positions of increasing importance. And we see that in, ambassadors and captains of ships and heads of industry and large farming complexes and heads of agribusinesses. This is a result of Iowa public education. Coincident with a lower amounts of state funds going to education is a decrement, a corresponding reduction in where Iowa stands in its public education. We need to reverse that. And I think this last administration, or this most recent bill that the governor signed, does that to a small degree. But we need to double time that. I'm a big fan of public education, and I'm a big fan of the necessity to do the basics in public education, but also to bring back the technical aspects of high school and learning to eat well in high school and do the shop classes. I took shop in high school. I really didn't need to because I did that every day for a living at my dad's machine shop. But it is something that not everybody should be prepared to go to college, but everybody needs to be prepared to be a contributing member of society. And so education is what is the first step in increasing the quality of life. And if we want to make Iowa the place people move to, I don't think we'll have more school districts, but ultimately we need to ensure that we need to pay the teachers properly and make sure the facilities are wired and we have broadband at home.
Absolutely. Going to healthcare now. This crisis has shown major gaps in our healthcare system right here in Iowa. Just a snapshot of this is that there's 545 ICU beds for the entire state in a population of over 3 million people. And here in the 4th district, we have less than 100 ICU beds. What are your plans for healthcare?
Well, JD, I think everyone shares the desired end state. I would expect so, and that is cradle to grave healthcare. Now, how do we get there? I love the way the military did it. We don't overdo it. We do what is necessary for every member equally, from seaman to admiral. And in society, the way we have it is those with the most cushy jobs and the best pay have the most advantageous medical care. Those who, now that we see this, that those with the least pay and the biggest challenge to stay at work so that they keep the wheels of society going in this time of a pandemic have the most feeble health care. So we need to bring back the Affordable Care Act in its full manner. Unlike it's been voted away by Steve King and Joni Ernst, et cetera, but multiple times. But we need to build up the Affordable Care Act as it's designed to be, fix its shortcomings. It certainly has a plethora of those. It's too expensive for those who are in the middle of middle age bracket. I understand that, but make that universal for everybody. And ultimately bring Medicare on the exchange, lower the age of Medicare, and then work on the inefficiencies associated with our healthcare. America doesn't have the corner on good healthcare. Having lived on 4 continents, moved 28 times, Iowa has decent healthcare, but there are some aspects of it where they're hugely inefficient.
Yeah. We're going to start answering some of the questions we have here. Before this started, we had a question that you were about to answer, and I wanted you to answer here because I think a lot of people would be interested in experience in the Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah, or go ahead.
Well, so the question was Captain Crozier on the Theodore Roosevelt. I blogged on this thing quite frequently when it first came out. I know Tom Modly, the Undersecretary of the Navy. He put me in charge of the High Technology Task Force when I retired, and for the department, and it's really forward-leaning. I have a lot of respect for him, and I think it's mutual. But I do believe this was mishandled. I having been a captain of a ship, it's a special responsibility, unlike any other in society. And Captain Crozier was concerned about the welfare of his crew. And he had a known list of casualties on the binnacle list and an unknown number who were going to soon join them. And they've since lost one of his sailors, and he himself has COVID as well. He wrote a widely circulated letter pleading with a plan that he thinks needed to be implemented. The issue, so you know, is more that he exhibited in an unclassified email a strategic shortcoming of the United States where this big asset would potentially be out of service. That was what Navy was upset about. In my book, we don't need that asset right now. We need to clean it up, and we need to ensure we maintain faith with the family. And consequently, he was right, and I said that. And then for firing him was improper before an investigation had ensued, and then having Mr. Modly fly to Guam and berate the crew was absolutely unconscionable, frankly. So poorly played. I'm sorry for my service and sorry for DOD to have done that. But here's the problem. When leaders, and we're well connected with leadership, I've been doing leadership jobs since 1981 in the military. When you try to second guess what your boss wants, and his leadership style, as in the president's, is rather unique and not at all transparent and flimsy because of some narcissistic underpinnings, then you often guess wrongly or you overreact. And that's what we saw in this situation.
The next question is from Bill, and he asks, is the current Iowa U.S. Senate race the motivation for your foray into politics?
Yeah, no, it's the larger issue is the love for a country, underpinned by how can I best express that to ensure that my almost 40 years in uniform don't see a major backsliding in this country and the things that got us where we are today. And so that was my impetus. It was clear to me that this president had a distinct opportunity to get reelected. And if the Senate is not under control by the other party, I believe he will run roughshod on this country as he has the last 2 years. I submitted my request to resign the week of his election, so you know, mostly because I didn't want to work for him. And my experience in Washington, D.C. in legislative affairs and strategy would have compelled my return to Washington, more than likely bridging into his administration. And so, yes, I entered politics to ensure that I did my utmost to bring the Democrats in control of the U.S. Senate.
And our next question from Laura, do you have any plans to campaign in Eastern Iowa? I know it's difficult now, but it sounds like they want to get to know you.
Well, spent a lot of time in Eastern Iowa. I'm sorry for this question. I had a step-off place in Iowa City and in Cedar Rapids. I have an office still in Des Moines. We have every intention. You're going to see me on TV here later this week. We've got standard bearers in many counties in the East. We just did some Facebook town hall lives with town hall live events the last couple of weeks. And we've had a lot of great endorsements from Eastern Iowa. Matter of fact, Ken, or well, I won't go into a list of names, but some of the biggest counties, most populous counties in Eastern Iowa, the county chairs have endorsed my candidacy. So I'm sorry that I haven't been around enough, but if you you call your county chair and say, let's do a town hall with Franken, I am happy to do it any time of day you desire.
Fantastic. Rick has a question here. America has the War Powers Act that requires the president to get consent from Congress before starting wars. Yet we seem to fire off cruise missiles and bombs all the time. What should and can Congress do about this?
Yeah, well, so what's in the Bush administration, the AUMF was passed in layman's terms, but it gives the president expanded authorities to conduct emergency war power maneuvers. And I voted no on the war in Iraq, just so you know, on the invasion for Iraq. And having spent a lot of time over there, and I'm sure I'm the only one around the table that had spent a lot of time around there that fateful day back in August of '02. Yes, so we should repeal the AUMF, step number one, and Congress ought to do its duty. So this isn't so much the president overstepping his bounds, it's Congress not stepping up for theirs. And they've been negligent in this, and you've not seen any leadership whatsoever, in my estimation, from our senators in this state. And matter of fact, they've kowtowed to the president's desires on this. One of the reasons, secondary, that I entered this race was to ensure that I would be an impediment to this president starting another war. And the people that he gathered around him, so you know, had their sights set on Iran. Just like the Bush administration had their sights on Iraq. This you need to know. And having been the constructor of some major plans for the Middle East, I can tell you that this will not go well. And this country will be a lesser country when we get in that tangle. And there's no winning a war on the Asia Peninsula or the Asia continent. And I'm happy to expand that on a separate town hall. I still have a security clearance. I've had a security clearance since 1978, so I have to watch what I say. But as soon as the president finds out about this, he'll more than likely revoke it. But this is an issue, and Congress needs to do its due diligence. I talk about the things that climate, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I bring to the Senate that nobody else has, and that's the depth of national security and international affairs and international trade and policies. After many, many years of doing this, decades and decades of doing this.
Yeah. We have a question here from Mel. What's your position on collective bargaining, especially for public employees?
I'm a fan of collective bargaining. I think the whole list of labor issues. I started a defense agency for Chuck Hagel in 2014. And it's the POW MIA accounting agency. It's those POW flags you see by VFWs and various town halls. And I had a union element of it, and that went swimmingly. They made us a better organization, and it was a mix of multiple different unions. I don't know why we have this adversity to unions, frankly. I think they bring up the value of the workforce for everyone. And and unless we do something about this, we're going to see a lessening of the role in unions to set the standard of good work processes and an emphasis on the worker versus the bottom line of the corporation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping that's one thing that we're going to see after this COVID-19, the pandemic, is that how much more we can appreciate workers. We're already there with grocery store clerks and frontline healthcare workers, no doubt, custodians.
And the construction workers right outside the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what we really need to be talking about, JD, is the people who oftentimes don't vote,
Mm-hmm.
B, have their voting compromised, and C, would be best supported by democratic principles, don't really realize that, and oftentimes fall into voting for Republicans, which is absolutely inimical to their well-being.
Yeah.
Across the board.
There's a question here. 2 answers ago, you had mentioned, I believe, AUMF, and they were wondering what that was.
So it is the abbreviation of the authorization of it's
just describe what it is.
It is the authorization and use of military force.
Oh, okay.
So this gives the president free rein if he deems necessary, and unfortunately it's always a he these days, if he deems necessary to utilize the military, that's in the best interest of the United States, even though it's a significant conflict, he has the authorization of doing so and informing Congress after the fact.
Yeah. Next, we had a couple different questions about Second Amendment gun control. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your?
Yeah, I got a gun rights flyer in the mail this morning. I looked at it and I threw it away, frankly. I've been working gun issues since 1996. I've been a gun owner since I was 8 years old, for crying out loud. I'm entirely ungunsplainable on weapons, having qualified on all of them in the military and got multiple years in combat, in combat, wrote a lot of letters home. So we've had a robbing of good sense with firearms in this country under a sole separate banner of rights and Second Amendment and a flag waving and even bringing a cross or two in on it. It's rather nonsensical. And so my position on firearms in this country is to enforce responsible gun ownership. And what I would do on the Hill is introduce legislation which gave gun ownership a renewed sense of responsibility to ensure that they are the ones in society, that society can be relied on to care and use their guns in a most responsible manner. And there's a lot behind those statements. And I've written the legislation in my head 1,000 times, and it's not a single bit of legislation, but a series of such. And ultimately to bring the United States more in line with many of the other countries I've previously lived in, who don't have the suicides by gunfire, the family, the blue on blue shootings inside families, the terrible inner city violence associated with firearms, and the free availability of such. And we owe it, all legislators, not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. So what my legislation would do was to give the Republicans a smokescreen that they have to get behind, not more than a smokescreen, a reality screen, so they can say that I support Franken's legislation because it's best for the future of the gun industry and also for those most ascribed to the Second Amendment.
I have a question that you grew up here in Iowa, in rural Iowa. Why the Navy?
JD. So why the Navy?
I mean,
Well,
there's not much water around here.
actually, we lived just a little ways from Dry Creek, and it had about 3 feet of water in it, and outside, along with a lot of bloodsuckers and bullheads.
Yep.
Um, so I learned to swim in the Rock River
Okay.
and in a sand pit. My father was in the Navy in World War II. My grandfather was in the Army in World War I, wounded vet. But I actually called the Air Force first,
Okay.
and because my brother was in the Navy, and my brother-in-law was a pilot in the Air Force, and I thought my brother was too successful in the Navy. I didn't want to follow in his footsteps, and I thought the Air Force would be more fun to fly because I wouldn't have to be gone for long periods of time. The Air Force didn't answer. So I Rolodex to the next phone number, which was the Navy. If the Marine Corps or something else was in there, I probably would have popped in there. I also thought I was healthy enough and sporty enough that I could have gone SEALs, and I thought, well, what the heck? If I don't become a pilot, I'll become a SEAL. But ultimately, I became a ship guy, and here we are.
Very cool. And thank you for your service as well. We'll just do a couple more questions. Barb asks, what do you think we should be done about our immigration situation? Those in detention for seeking asylum, those here without documentation, and those being held in Mexico.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the DACA. We should, if their records are clean and or not overly blemished, we should adopt them as citizens straight away. We need them. And here's what's really glaring in plants that, in all of the work that we're doing in Iowa. I mean, many major industries in the United States, especially in Iowa, would collapse without our immigrants. And we're not just talking about Central American and Hispanic immigrants. We're talking about Africa, Eastern European, et cetera. These are valued members of the workforce. Also, those that came in on professional work visas. We need these people. And so we should, instead of doing what this administration is, and that's reduced by tenfold the number of immigrants that are permitted in this country, actually double or triple the number of immigrants, and flood the market so that we're not sitting at 2% unemployment before pandemic, and that we actually had some flexibility where people, businesses could expand. A number of businesses in this state are truncated by the number of employees they can get, which is preposterous. So, I mean, those that are undocumented, we should have them rise out of the shadows, verify their identification, and ensure that they are not on the wrong side of the law. And we should establish a well understood, simple path to citizenship. And then ultimately, we as a country, we need to have secure borders. I'm 100% on board with that as a person of long-term national service. But we also need to be eyes wide open about the necessity of why people come here. So instead of cutting out on the World Health Organization and other overseas outreach activities, we should work rather in ensuring that nations from which they come have the necessary structures so that when the healthy leave, the communities don't fail back there. And I've seen this in Africa. I've seen this in South Asia. I've got a long history with immigrants, also the countries through which they pass and they're preyed upon. And ultimately, like in this along the south side of our southern border, where I am sure life is hell for prospective immigrants trying to get across the border. We need a comprehensive plan that serves America, makes us stronger, and helps the world economy and our economy as well.
Yeah. We'll do one last question here, and then wrap up after that. But the question is about minimum wage, and Iowa is one of the places that's $7.25. Are you in favor of a $15 minimum wage, or what would you like to?
Well, I pay the non-salary people on my staff $15 an hour, and have since I kicked off my campaign. And you know, I didn't trumpet that. I mean, it's just, if you want them to live, I suggest we adopt that, and it can be a rather graduated process in the state. But you know, the minimum wage was designed for a family of 3 to live in frugal elegance on one wage, 40 hours a week. Think about that. Family of 3, frugal elegance, 1 salary. Today, throughout the nation, there isn't a county in this nation, 3,000 counties or something, where you can live on Iowa's minimum wage, 1 person living maybe under a bridge. I doubt if even that. Yeah. The process has fallen behind. It is complete fallacy. There's not a study out there that says that the minimum wage is a unequaling force in the wage structure. It just doesn't exist. Other countries do it, and other countries who are passing us up in productivity. I suggest we get on with it. And the people have said to me in this state that, you know, I really can't afford to pay my employees a minimum wage. You know what? I think we can. I think we can't afford not to.
Yeah. There's more questions, but for time's sake, we'll leave it there, and it'll allow folks to follow you a little bit more. Where can they follow you? Where can they get more information?
Thanks, JD. Frankenforiowa.org. And there's a Facebook thing. If you would like to get involved with our volunteers, please click on that. Go multiple layers down. We got some great endorsements from statewide leaders. And the moment those endorsements rolled out, we got a whole bunch more that came in behind that. So we're on the ascendancy. We're on the 45-day run for a primary on the 2nd of June. So and I think this is great that we've got 2 people in Sioux City, Iowa, who can buoy all of the 4th district up. And I hope to be value added to your race against whoever the presumptive Republican is. Just like I think you'll be value added to me in this side of the state. And we're not going to win a statewide election in this state without doing better in the 4th district. We've learned this over and over again. And frankly, it's great that the citizens of the 4th district are the ones that choose our presumptive candidates versus somebody in Washington, D.C., who are also the people that gave us the app.
I will just say that I literally, right before we came on, my postal carrier gave me my absentee ballot request form. The safest thing to do, get these in, vote early, and you can vote by mail, you can drop it off. Those are ways where you don't have to be in person, and in this time of a pandemic, we're all trying to be safe. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Best of luck to you. June 2nd, making sure I say that right. Best of luck, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, JD. Thanks for this opportunity.
No problem.